In my last video, we started Minecraft's most realistic mod pack, Terra Firma Greg. We set up our camp, molded pottery, found copper, and made our first metal tools. With that covered, we'll jump into this week where we journeyed all over the world. After making our first copper tools, I set out to chop some trees and gather a whole bunch of wood. I spent the rest of the day carrying logs and crafting chests before laying the foundation for our house. Part of the reason we need so much wood is to make a charcoal pit. We need charcoal to be able to make a charcoal forge, which will allow us to really start getting into metalworking. To make the charcoal pit, you have to pile logs into a hole, cover it with dirt, and set the logs on fire and seal it for 8 in-game hours. I decided to head out and walk around while I was waiting on the charcoal to finish, when that bear from last week showed up again.
Oh. No. Jesus Christ.
After running around for most of the day trying to lose him, I got back home, placed down the stone for the forge, and put some more work in on the house. The charcoal pit finally finished burning late into the night, but I dug it all up in the dark and piled some into the forge. The forge basically acts like a weird furnace, more like a pit kiln. However, instead of having to dig a hole and leave your items in for a super long time, the forge melts the metal into vessels super quickly, and you can take them out to fill molds as needed. You may be wondering why everything is in black and white, and no, this isn't a filter. I just ran out of food and couldn't find any in time to stop this hunger effect from happening. After finding enough food to last me at least the next couple of days, I went searching for a cave so I could carve out a block of smooth stone to use for a stone anvil, which we'll need if we ever want to start smithing better tools. Overnight, I realized I actually didn't have all that much copper, and we'd need to start digging out the vein that we found in my last video. I made a prospecting pick, which will make it way easier to find the ore, and some cave support beams to prevent cave-ins. Since this mod pack introduces cave-ins if you don't use supports while you're digging, the safest way to get down to the ore veins is actually just to dig straight down. I started getting hints of copper ore on my pro pick, so it was time to dig a tunnel and get to searching. Eventually, I broke into an underwater cave and figured it might be a good way to cover more area, which turned out to be a mistake. I went back home to grab some supplies when I ran into a friend. On my second trip back home, I had to make sure I didn't accidentally run into the bear again, which I was able to do, and got started going back to the mines to recover my items. When I got back to the hole, I realized I forgot to place ladders behind me up to the surface. So to get back down, I needed to craft a bunch of shovels, dig a bunch of dirt, pile the dirt into the hole, and dig my way down. I was finally able to get my stuff back and just called it quits on this mine. It's easier to hit the ore vein dead on than to try digging around searching for it. I won't bore you too much with this since you just saw me do the same thing, but I was able to find this vein pretty quickly. As I was digging up all the ore and placing my supports, I didn't realize that I was digging an andesite, which apparently drops a dust that just kills you if you pick it up. So I died again. It wasn't as hard to get my items back this time, so I just went right back to mining. After mining a bunch of ore, I decided it was time to place my ladder and head back home. On the morning of day 11, I started melting down all of the ore that we had just mined and storing it in the vessel, so we could pour it into molds later. While I was waiting on that, I went to go find a bunch of clay to use and some more tool molds that we hadn't made last time. Since those were going to take forever to finish, I started digging up the dirt floor of my house and placing some nice rosewood planks. When the molds were done, when the molds were done, I reheated all of the melted ore so that we could pour the molds for the javelin, knife, hammer, and chisel. After that, I finished placing down the floor of my house and set out to the ocean to look for shells, which we'll need a bit later on. When I got back home, I started making some barrels, which we'll need for leather making. We're missing two things that are really essential to the forge: bellows and a crucible. I'll talk about the crucible later, but the bellows basically just make it so the forge can get super hot, and we need leather to make them, which we'll need to make lime water first. First, I gathered a bunch of smooth stone blocks. Then, I crafted a quern and a handstone. I ground down a few of the shells we collected earlier into flux. Then, I put the flux in the barrel of water and made lime water. The first step in making leather is to soak hide in a sealed barrel of lime water and let it sit. So while we were waiting on that, I put some more work in on the walls of the house. And when the hides were done soaking, I scraped them down with a knife. Then I let them soak in a barrel of water. One other thing we'll need in the future is beeswax, and since we'll need a lot of it, it's a good idea for us to start collecting it now. I made the beehives, collected a bunch of flowers, and made a really nice area for my bees to move in and live. Then I went back to building up some of my walls. I set out in the morning to go grab some more stone for my walls, and I made sure to grab enough stone to finish up the walls of my home and place them down, as well as some fences to act as windows since we have no way of getting glass yet. After that, my hide was done soaking and it was time for the last step, soaking the hides in tannin. It was pretty simple to make, so I just threw some of the logs in there before leaving to make a canoe. Remember how I said we'd need to make a bellows and a crucible? Well, in order to make a crucible, we'll need kaolin clay, which is like normal clay, but pink. But it won't spawn in the biome I'm in or the island I'm on, so it's time for us to sail across the ocean to try and find some. We also just can't craft a normal boat. We have to carve out this canoe and burn it to seal out the water before we can take it sailing. I pushed off and sailed just a short little bit back home, where I docked in a lake nearby. The tannin was done, so I sealed some hides and went back out to get some sand. I actually don't remember why I needed the sand, but it was a good chance to get some more shells, which we'll need a lot of. Then, I decided it was time to start searching for a tropical island. After sailing around for a few days, I found an island, and the first thing I stumbled on was a diamond ore vein, which, unfortunately, the diamonds aren't super useful at this point for us. The main thing we're looking for in this vein is graphite, the second ingredient we need to make a crucible. At night, I started running around trying to find a blood lily, which is a flower that only grows on or near kaolin clay deposits. I didn't find any that night, but I did find a kapok tree, which we'll need later on to make some rubber out of its sap. Since I wasn't having any luck on this side of the island, I figured it was a good time to take the river deeper inland to see if there was a better chance of kaolin clay spawning. When I got out of my boat, it actually didn't take a super long time for me to find a blood lily, as well as some papyrus that we'll need for paper, and some limestone, which is just an easier way for us to make flux. But it took a bit longer to find the actual deposit, and I spent the rest of the day filling up my pocket since we'll need a whole lot of it. I spent most of the night searching for my boat in the dark since the jungle is pretty easy to get turned around in, but I found my canoe and started sailing back home. On my way, I stumbled across an olive tree and grabbed some saplings. When I got home, I placed down the olive saplings and started organizing when something scurried across my floors. Turns out, rats were breaking through the fences in my walls to get to the food I had left in my chest.
Or maybe it's the door you left open.
So I spent an unbelievable amount of time hunting this one down. Then I ran into our friend again. Some moments define a life, where everything, success or failure, hope or despair, life or death, hinges on a single choice, unshaped by chance or luck. And in a split second, I chose not to let this bear scare me. It wasn't my day, it was his. I tried to get the high ground, but I missed my jump. I thought that was it. The water was going to slow me down too much and he would catch me, but it slowed him down too. I turned around and started swinging. But just one hit from him hurt real bad. So I sunk down to the bottom of the lake where he couldn't hit me and let him have it. I had done it. I was super surprised that my last video did as well as it did, so if you're tuning in again, thank you so much for watching. I did want to take a moment to shout out the commenters who left some supportive comments. It means the world to me. Thank you. I'm planning to try and make one of these a week. We'll see if I stick exactly to that, but that's the goal. If you made it this far, please consider liking and subscribing. It helps me know if you want to see more. Thanks for watching.
Dude, I have been terrorized by this bear in this game for like 3 hours, and I just killed it. Holy shit.